A scientific method is a set of techniques used to acquire new knowledge or to correct the knowledge that we already have. We've had the scientific method for about 400 years, and there's a lot in it. What I'm going to show you is 4 simple rules that give you the basics or the essence of the scientific method and show you how to apply it in your everyday life. So let's start here. Let's say that I make a claim, and the claim is that I have telekinetic powers. Do you believe me? Well, the answer should be no, because if you're sensible, you will assume the null hypothesis in this case. You will assume that I don't have telekinetic powers, or I probably don't, until you see some evidence that I do. But let's say that I propose a way that we can show that I have telekinetic powers. This is the second part of the scientific method. We test the claim. Let's say that I propose to test it in this way. I give you a bunch of coins, and I tell you that if you flip the coins, I will be able to control them with my mind to make them come out the way that I want them to. You agree, and we decide to test the claim. So I say that I'll control each of the coins to make them come out heads. You flip the first one, and you get a heads. That is what I predicted. Are you now convinced that I have telekinetic powers? No, and the reason for that is quite obvious. It's not that hard to get a heads. The odds of getting a single heads is 1 out of 2. That's not very impressive. This brings us to the third step of the scientific method, which is investigate or calculate or analyze the strength of the evidence that you have. So I've made a claim that I have telekinetic powers, we've run a test, I've given you a single heads, but as far as you're concerned, this isn't very impressive, and you're right, it's only a 50-50 chance. But let's say you flip another coin and you get another heads. Are you convinced now? Maybe not. But what about after the third heads, and then the fourth heads, and then the fifth heads? Are you convinced after 5 heads in a row? Most people at this point would say yes. 5 heads in a row is fairly convincing, because if you look at it, the odds of doing it once is 1 out of 2, but the odds of doing it twice becomes 1 out of 4, 3 times 1 out of 8, 4 times 1 out of 16, 16, and 5 times 1 out of 32. Increasingly difficult to pull that off. So yes, I would be convinced at this point. I would say, if someone could make a coin flip come out heads 5 times in a row, when they said that's what they would do, I'd say yes, that convinces me. This brings us to the last part of the scientific method, which is to reject the null hypothesis. This essentially means changing your mind if the evidence is strong enough. So you make a claim, you're skeptical of the claim, you test the claim, you evaluate the strength of the evidence, and if the evidence is strong enough, you change your mind. We can do this in other ways as well, not only with coins. Let's say that the claim is still that I have telekinetic powers, but this time instead of demonstrating it using coins, I will instead use dice. So I give you some dice and I tell you to roll them, and I tell you that each time you roll them, I will make them come out with a 6 on top. So you roll the first one and it's a 6, are you convinced? And you roll the second one and it's also a 6, are you convinced at that point? And I don't own any more dice, I'm just going to draw this one. Let's say you roll a third one, and that's also a 6, and then a fourth one, which is a 6. Are you convinced? At some point, you should be convinced. Not necessarily that I have telekinetic powers, but that something is going on. So you've done the same thing that you did before. You considered the claim, you were initially skeptical, you tested the claim, you evaluated the strength of the evidence, and then you changed your mind if the evidence was strong enough. If you understand why you would react this way to these claims, then you understand what the scientific method is and how to use it.